Hello, and welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. This is our latest episode. We're glad you're with us. It is 2024, and we're really happy about that. And we've got a lot of exciting things to talk about today. Our guest is Colleen Slaughter, who is a transformational leadership coach. And one of the things in reading Colleen's bio that I really reacted to and love was that she mentions, and I'm going to really want to know more about it, that she helps leaders make bolder decisions, which I think is really pretty cool. People need to make more bolder decisions. Well, in the world, people need to make more decisions in general and not wait for others to do it. But that's another story, and we'll probably get into that too. And Colleen has a new book that she is working on and getting ready to publish, and that's going to be pretty exciting. So we'll talk about that. Lots to talk about today, needless to say. So Colleen, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're really glad you're
Thank you
here.
so much, Michael. Thank you for that welcome. And I didn't hear that before, that was interesting for you. So looking forward to dive in.
Well, I was reading the bio today, and that just jumped out at me. And I had read it before, but today it just really jumped out. And I think it's such an interesting and absolutely appropriate concept and thing to deal with, the whole idea of making bolder decisions. And in reality, in our world today, as I think about it, making decisions in general, because too many people, well, I don't know whether I really want to decide that. What do you think? And people don't make decisions, and that's unfortunate, and gets too many people in trouble, I would think you would say.
For me, yeah. So I think I'm just reflecting for a moment about ways to approach the question. I've got two different things that seem to jump out at me. One is to say, I think people make decisions all the time. That's how we act, right? Are we going to go left? We're going to go right. We're going to go forward. We're going to go back.
Right.
But what I think is missing, and this is what I sense you're getting at, is the boldness in their decisions. But boldness not necessarily meaning huge or big things they're doing, but things that require courage, right? Most of which, of course, one look at my website or the things I've sent would show that being more authentic, finding our own voice, standing up for what's important to us, all these things are where I think the world is lacking in general.
Yeah, I think you're right. People are always making decisions. Do we go left or go right? Do we go? Do we stop?
Exactly.
And so many of those are just kind of automatic decisions. But when it comes to really making a decision that you know is going to make some sort of major change or have some sort of major effect in what you do, or you realize, well, this is going to affect other people, or what are other people going to think of me for making that decision, as opposed to it being an automatic decision, that's where it gets interesting.
Yeah, totally. More intentional about what they're doing.
Right.
Absolutely.
The whole idea of more intentional decisions or not. And not making a decision is, of course, a decision, but that's not really a good thing. And then you get mad when things don't go the way you want. Well, you didn't make a decision and you didn't choose to deal with it, whatever it is.
Indeed. Indeed.
Well, let's start a little bit more in the past. Tell me a little bit about the younger Colleen, where you came from, what you did growing up, and how you kind of ended up where you are. Because you're not anywhere near where we are. You're over in France,
Kansas. That's for
yeah.
sure.
You're not in Kansas anymore.
Not
right.
in Kansas anymore at all. That's for sure. Although I did come from another K-state. So I grew up in Kentucky.
Where?
And I grew up in Louisville, actually, although I was born in Michigan. I was born in Grand Rapids, but came to Kentucky relatively quickly after I was born. And
I assume the rest of your family came with you. You didn't go by yourself.
Just my mom, actually. My mom and my aunt. My mom had grown up in New Jersey, and one of 7 kids, typical Irish Catholic. When she became pregnant with me, she was sent to go live with one of her sisters who was in Michigan. So it was the 3 of us, if you will, that then made the drive to Louisville to meet yet another sister and her husband, and what was starting to be then their children as well. So that was the start. And then how was I? I was similar to what you might be picking up now, is pretty spunky, pretty bookwormy, yet also loving music, into sports. I used to play t-ball and softball, and yeah, I'd like to write. Even then, I remember writing books and getting awards. And but I had this yearning, I just have this really strong intuition I was always given, which has been one of the determinants for my course in life overall. And so when it came time for high school, and you know how it is typically in the States with foreign languages, we don't
Yeah.
start them, in my view, early enough.
Yes.
So in high school, given the option of French, Spanish, or German, and for me at that moment, there was no question it was going to be French. And then at the earliest opportunity, I came over here. By the way, so everybody knows, I do live in Lyon. I live in France, but I've had a series of back and forth with the States, about 20 years of that. But just to back up, then I had fallen in love with the notion of France, came to Paris to do an internship. I found that, wow, is this completely different than anything? It woke me up, especially coming from Kentucky, with all due respect to everybody, all my friends and family there. And I just wanted to come back. There was something in me that woke up. And because what I found is that when I'm here, I have quite a different work, right? My clients are different because of the mix of nationality, because of the mix of language, friends coming from all over the world, and even former American, even fellow Americans, who also share this international love. So in a nutshell, that's how I ended up here. Of course, there's more I can say to fill in the dots, but curiosity, intuition, and there's that word again, boldness or courage, is essentially how I ended up here.
So did you go to college?
I did. I went to University of Kentucky undergrad.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a wildcat. More ways than one. I used to say that at a Toastmasters meeting, like, yeah, I'm a wildcat. No. Yeah, I went to University of Kentucky, majored in French, had 2 degrees, French and then business management. And the French piece was because in high school, a graduate had come back and talked to the French club and said, whatever you do, don't stop taking the language. It will seem like other things are more important, but don't stop taking it. And I followed her advice, and so glad that I did. Of course, it helped tremendously with the choice that I made afterward. But I went there, that was my undergrad. And then from graduate school, I actually went to a school in France. I went to 2 schools in France. So I've done 2 graduate degrees in France.
Mm. Now, when did you graduate with your undergraduate degree?
That was in 1990.
Oh, okay.
No, sorry. That was my high school. 94, I graduated with the undergraduate degree.
Got it. The reason I asked is was probably about 10 or 11 years later, and I don't remember now when, but I was invited to go to Breathitt County, Kentucky to do a speech.
Really?
And the speech was because of being in the World Trade Center and all that, of course, but the speech was to an event. It was an awards assembly at school district in Breathitt County. And what they did is they gave everyone who had attained at least a C average from 6th grade on, they gave them an award. And the higher your grade point average and the longer you did it, then the more notice you got, until at the end, there were actually 4 students who had a 4.0 GPA from 6th grade all the way through high school. But when I was preparing for this speech, they said, we're starting at 5 o'clock with all the awards and all that and your speech, but you have to be done by 6:30. You cannot go a minute beyond 6:30. So whenever you start, you have to end your speech at 6:30. And the reason is it was the day of the NCAA March Madness final championship, and the Wildcats were one of the 2 teams in the championship.
Basketball country.
And there was no way anyone would stay in that gymnasium where the speech was and the whole event was taking place after 6:30. And at 6:30, we ended. And by 6:31, the place was empty. I was
Yeah, I'm not
impressed.
surprised. Of course, having grown up in Louisville, there's the big rivalry, the University of Louisville and the University of Kentucky,
Yeah,
right? Or Louisville, as we
Louisville.
say, those who are from Louisville.
I was wondering when you were going to get back to that. Louisville. Yeah.
Louisville.
Louisville.
Yeah, so Louisville. So the Cardinals and the Cats, right? The Cards and Cats, as we say when we're there. So that's the big talk, particularly around this time of year.
I also had the pleasure one year of being in North Carolina when March Madness was about to begin. And of course, there you have Duke, NC State, and
Yeah.
University of North
And
Carolina.
UNC. Yep. And guess
Same.
where I lived the last time I lived in the States?
Oh, did you?
North Carolina. My
There
kids
you
were born.
are.
Both of my girls were born in Raleigh. So
Wow.
yeah, right there in the triangle where all of those three schools are.
So do you miss basketball?
I used to play actually. That was one of the sports I played in grade school. And no, I like to watch it, but I've just never had the habit of, well, let me go back on that. What I tend to watch now is I'll watch soccer, World Cup soccer, whether it's women or men, particularly women, because my daughter's really into soccer now.
Oh, good.
And I had the
Good for
joy
her.
of seeing the women's team, the US women's team play when it was here in Lyon, the finals. And of course, they won that year in
Yeah.
2000, I think it was 19, if I'm not mistaken. But no, I don't actually miss basketball. But if I did, I could, thanks to the internet.
Yeah, you can watch it.
Quite accessible if I want to.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Well, of course, on New Year's in 2024 at the Rose Bowl, we had Michigan and Alabama in football, which I think was quite the contest, and Michigan won that. So it's interesting because they were number one in the rankings, and then in the Sugar Bowl, Texas and Washington played, and Washington was number two, and they won. So it's actually going to be number one and number two, or it was one and two going into the championship, which I guess is on the 8th of January. So it's just interesting, all this sports stuff.
Well, there's lots of metaphors. I have a dear colleague who goes around the world talking about resilience and picking up habits of resilience. And he will often use the metaphor of the sports psychology. So yeah, there's a lot of areas in life where we can bring that in.
Yeah, it definitely does play into it. Well, so you went to college and you got 2 degrees and all that. And what did you do after college?
Well, just before the end of college, I met a Frenchman in Kentucky. So he became a great reason or excuse, depending, I guess, how we look at it, to get to France again. Because I spent a couple of years then going back and forth between France and the US, because at that point I didn't have working papers or the right to live here. And as a typical American, in my experience, it's much more American what I'm about to say than it is French, which is that I had no idea what I wanted to do when I got out of school.
Mm-hmm.
That's not very French. They pick it out at 18 when they do the baccalaureate, big exam. They pretty much determine their life from that. But not me. I had no idea. So I was just grabbing at jobs that came along, and being an Anglophone, English mother tongue, even with high unemployment in France, it became pretty easy, relatively easy to go from one job to the next. So I found myself going back and forth across the Atlantic for several years, coming to France with a pile of money I made waitressing, for example, finding a job with pharmaceutical industry, going back to the States because I ran out of some money or whatever it was. So I had this pattern going until at one point I was working with a Canadian stock brokerage company. I won't say the name because I didn't have working papers. But here's what I can tell you is the woman that was there in charge of the admin piece, she suggested, she was on the phone with her best friend at the Irish embassy talking about how can we get Colleen actually working here legally. And the friend at the embassy said, but Colleen, that's Irish, isn't it Irish?
I was just thinking that.
Yeah. And the woman that I was working with asked me this. Oh, no, just my grandmother was born there, but it was ages ago. She hasn't been back. The person at the embassy says, "Oh yeah, she can be Irish." And that was like, what do they say, a worm in my ear that just stayed with me for a while. And then when on my next trip back to the States, I did all the paperwork proving that, and here we talk about boldness, right? I think so, but I did all this paperwork proving that I'm her granddaughter, and from woman through the lineage of women, because she's my maternal grandmother. There was extra paperwork involved, multiple states involved. But at the end, I ended up with 2 passports, which has facilitated quite a lot because it's allowed me to live a big part of my vision, which is establishing myself in Europe.
Hmm. And what happened to the Frenchman you met in Kentucky?
Ah, I forgot about him. No, no, we stayed together for quite a while, like 7 years, and then we outgrew that, let's say, and moved on, went on our separate ways.
Ah,
Yeah. But it was a nice it was a period where, of course, in early 20s, like many of us, I was really looking for myself.
yeah.
Did a geographic to try to get away from some things I didn't want to look like, which is really typical. I'm a great at geographic and it's fine. But the cool part is in doing that, of course, everywhere I go, there I am. So it's not about getting away from myself ever. But coming here has completely changed my life in terms of the perspective I have from this side of the world, and the people that I meet who are obviously from everywhere or have traveled quite a bit. So in many, many ways, I went from, feels like I've become much more of a prism,
Mm.
meaning I have multiple views, multiple ways to see things.
Hmm. Well, and it gives you a lot more perspective.
Well, exactly. And that's one of the biggest tools I have as a coach as well. And when I'm helping teams and helping leaders step into their vision and what they find fulfilling,
Yeah.
to be able to see things in different ways, like you're saying, with the multiple perspectives through, for example, if we use the metaphor of a prism, that comes in very handy.
So is there a significant other in Colleen's life these days?
Is there a now? Well, that's a forward question. My goodness.
I'm nosy, aren't I?
You are quite nosy, indeed.
Well, you said
Well,
you
let's
had two little
say
girls.
I do have 2 girls. I can say that they're my significant others. Why don't we say that? My
There you
my
go.
favorite dates always my 13-year-old and my 10-year-old.
There you
Yeah,
go.
there we go. Yeah,
That
indeed.
works.
Now, I've been through quite a bit of transformation these last 4 years. So, just the fact that I'm even having my own apartment in a country that's not mine, and there's quite a streak of independence in me, you can
Well,
say.
you're kind of making it yours though, which is fair.
Yes, I am. But I also think more of a citizen of the world. That's how I
Yeah.
see myself more than
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
So I'm also
So,
very American. Partial Irish, the fieriness of the Irish.
well, there you
Yeah,
go. And that's why you make bold decisions.
that's right. That's exactly right.
So how did you get into coaching? So you worked for a stock company for a
Yeah, that
little
was one
while.
of the jobs I did. Yeah, indeed. Um, Well, I had this group of friends that were very inspiring for me. And one of them, in a really loving way, kind of challenged me and let me know that she was shocked that I had been doing the job I was doing, not at the stock brokerage firm, but something else I was doing, which was well below my competency level. And she nudged me and said, you could be so much more.
Hmm.
And she said it in a loving way. I didn't feel criticized. I could really hear it and step into it. And at that time, a few women in that group were going back to school. So I realized that the thing for me to do was to go back and get my MBA. So I did that. I got into a school that's well known here in France. It's actually quite known internationally. And at that point, again, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Here I am with not knowing what I wanted to do, but I knew that with an MBA, I would have a much easier time not knowing what I wanted to do. And I got into consulting,
Ah,
management consulting. I got to say, I didn't want to get into consulting because I had heard horror stories about it taking over your life, not having any kind of balance. never sleeping, etc. But I loved it. I traveled the world with this little boutique Parisian consulting firm. My first time I went to Japan and South Korea. I was back in the US regularly, so I got to see family quite often. And it was through that boutique firm that I first heard about coaching. And as with most things in my life, the bigger things that I've ever done, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of it I do through intuition. And so what happened when I first heard of coaching is my whole body lit up. I just had this big expansive experience. I said, that is me. And I know that's me. But I was early 30s, finding all kinds of other things I could do before. I mean, how could I possibly think of switching careers now? And I'm in the middle of this. I can't stop and switch. And so it went on for a few years, which I think, again, if we talk about stages of life is pretty typical. But then I ended up at a crossroads. I was back in the States, really wanting to come back to France. And I coached myself and said, you can go back to France, but first you're going to make a step change in your career. Because that career, the first one that I was so holding on to and not wanting to change, actually, I didn't stop complaining about it. And so I said, okay, you go back, but you're going to go back on different terms. And I did my homework. I picked out the coaching school to go to. At first, I was going to do coaching school as a feather in my hat, a way to go back into corporate world and human resources, for example. And midway through that coaching school, I knew, forget the feather. This is the whole hat. This is what I want to do. There just wasn't a question. I mean, one thing I will say, and of course, it's been a learning curve, all of it, both being a coach, being a better coach, but, evolving. I mean, my level of coaching evolves as I grow as a person, but also learning how to run a business and have a successful business. All of it's been a learning curve, which just by the nature of a learning curve probably is clear. It has not always been easy, right? But I can't imagine, like, the gift in it is, I don't have a job I'll do when I retire. Like, this is what I'm going to do. I don't need to think about another career to have, something else to grow into. This is it. Like, I'm very happy to keep doing this forever. And that's a wonderful gift.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how I got into it. That's how I figured it out, went to coaching school, still thought I'd sidestep it a little bit by going into HR, and then had yet again another light bulb moment where, no, this is actually going to be the full deal.
Well, it's good that you're able to to actually be a person who recognizes that and who listens to her intuition. And although it sounds like you had to be dragged a little bit kicking and screaming because you kept taking little side steps, so am I really sure about this? And then something comes along and says, yeah, you really are. And then eventually you decide that's what you really want to do.
Exactly what I wrote about in one of my bolder moves in the book too. That's hilarious, but it's true. And even for the major in the MBA, even though always was my dream to have my own business, and even though that school is well known for its entrepreneurship program, I initially chose a whole different major. And then it was only once the term got started and I finally, light bulb moment again, what am I doing? And I went and talked to the professor of the entrepreneurship program, and I was able to get into it even though I had missed some of the classes. But exactly, there's a part of me rebelling, but a rebelling against my own good, right? That's like, why not just follow the signs? Follow the ET movie, follow the Reese's Pieces.
Right.
Just follow them, they're there.
Right. Come on, don't make life so difficult for yourself.
Exactly. But that, to your point earlier, right? That's what a lot of us do.
Mm-hmm.
We want to, and that's my whole thing with my coaching, and actually anything that I'm writing is all about just being true to ourselves with a capital S, right? Just what are the Reese's Pieces we're seeing, and just follow those. Just go forward.
Sounds like a good life lesson you finally learned.
I did indeed. Yeah.
And have you really learned it?
Have I really learned it? I would say I am learning it. Again, there some of the biggest things I've done. Now, what I didn't say, I said a little bit, but for example, when I went to this MBA, which is a top school, I had applied as an administrative assistant. And I'm not by any means, shape, or form dodging administrative assistants, not at all. But for me, it was something I could do pretty much in my sleep.
Yeah.
But I had chosen it as a very safe job, just easy peasy, not stressing me out. And when people hear that I went from such a role into this top MBA program, most of the time mouths drop. They can't believe it, because how could this school, let a secretary in, or how could it
Yeah.
be that I actually was that smart, or whatever is the thinking. But here's my take on it. I knew that it was the right thing for me to do, to apply, and I could feel it. And I knew that my job was just to apply. The rest wasn't my business. The rest was going to work itself out. And essentially that's what happened. And so I do learn the lesson. I would say most of the time I'm armed with courage. I'm armed with honesty. I just had an insight today about something in my life where I wasn't being honest with
Mhm.
myself, but I didn't know it, right? They say denial, not the river in Egypt, but the real denial, it's there to protect us. And sometimes we know what we know when we need to know it. But at other moments, it's true that we can make excuses and stall. So I think the
Yeah.
main thing is just staying open and honest with ourselves.
Yeah. And it is it's sometimes it's a challenge to come to that realization, but it sounds like you mostly have. Do you analyze or do any kind of introspection every day, thinking about what happened like on a given day or just in what's going on, and use that as a springboard to try to help you decide what you're going to do or how you improve, or does this just sort of happen?
Oh, it's a good question. So I'll say, like the Germans say, "Jein." I don't know if you speak any German, but "Jein" means yes and no.
Hmm. Yes.
um, I like that word. I find
I
it very
love it.
helpful.
Yeah.
Yes, in that I'm not just a coach by profession, but again, I really feel born to do this. So it's part of my nature to want to develop myself as a human. So it's both. If one were to come in my place and see my bookshelves, they are full of self-development stuff, whether it's as physical as the yoga certification I have, as intellectual as the organizational change programs I've been on, or as philosophical, right, as Buddhism or what. Not that I'm a practicing Buddhist, but there's a lot that I subscribe to. But the idea is that there's a lot here that mostly shows what I've been up to in my life. So it's not just a career for me, it's who I am. And that said, I do have a really strong meditation practice. Twice a day I meditate. It helps me step back from my life and get that balcony, which I hear you say in my words, get that balcony view of what's going on.
Hmm.
So I don't necessarily, I do analyze it. I'm told that I have a very like rapid mind, but I also feel into it, because that's something I've learned mostly through my professional life, but I use it all over, is also to go by energy and feeling, which has a lot to do with intuition about what feels right, where something might be off, what feels good to me, what doesn't. And that's what I mean. Earlier today, I had an insight about a situation I was accepting without realizing that it didn't really feel good to me, but I was accepting it because of part of the way I was programmed.
Hmm.
And so as I uncover my own mechanisms, coping mechanisms, and what's behind them and what's driving me, of course I get clearer. I feel better, and it also equips me to help other people do the same.
Yeah, and I think that the whole idea of self-analysis or introspection isn't necessarily you go from one thing to another thing to another thing and then a solution pops out, but that you take the time at the end of the day or at some point, or maybe even more than one time during the day to just kind of think about what's going on. And as you point out, meditate and let the brain and the body really communicate with each other rather than just trying to run pell-mell through whatever's going on in the course of the day. And if we do that, we tend to be a whole lot better grounded.
Oh, no question. And I make much better choices for myself, for others. I'm much more in alignment. We talk about being in alignment with ourselves. It's no question. Yeah, it's changed my life. And I resisted. There's another thing I resisted for a long time was meditation.
Hmm.
The stages I went through to finally get to a place of sitting there for twice a day. Uh, quite comical when I think about it. That and yoga, and journaling, because I also journal every day. And there are some days where I just get busy and or tired and I don't do it, but I always notice the difference the next day. I notice a difference in how I sleep. I notice the difference in, the yogis call it chitti vritti in the mind, where it's really racing. I
Mm-hmm.
notice that, and the quality of my life goes down. Maybe I'm just getting old. I don't know, but I'm at a place where I just want to feel serene. Like that's what's important to me is serenity. And there's a lot of things that go into serenity. I don't just want to sit on the beach meditating all the time, although that's not a bad idea. But the main driver to help me get there is definitely, as you were saying earlier, the choices I make.
Mm-hmm.
And I can make the better choices when I come from a place of center, which these
Yeah.
practices I listed help me get to.
So for you, the bottom line is you ended up going into leadership and transformational coaching. And it
Mhm.
doesn't sound like that was the original plan,
It was
you,
not the original plan. I
but
had
it
to
is
reset
where,
these in my path. Yeah. Do you want to hear how I got here in
sure.
this particular kind of coaching? Okay. So I had been working with an MCC, which is a master certified coach. And I worked with her practice for quite a while. I had different hats on there. Talk about hats again. I like to use metaphors. One of which was recruiting in North America, recruiting for her firm. And I learned about a company that has become one of my biggest clients, but this company does a lot of exactly that transformation, but not transformation. So here can be a misnomer. I'd like just take a pause, and I have been recruited before for interviews to run quote transformation programs. And I show up to the interview and we're talking about two completely different things with the idea of transformation. So the transformation I'm referring to is really about the human transformation, because myself and my colleagues and those who founded this firm I'm talking about, the new firm that I'm talking about, the way I founded my company, the way I know in my bones is the way I'm supposed to be coaching me, my path. In that transformation, we're talking about humans developing into better versions of themselves. And indeed, that's how we see leaders improving. We improve as leaders when we improve as humans. And there's a lot of people that have myths around what leadership is, what it isn't. But at the end of the day, it literally is about stepping into who we really are and inspiring others to do the same. And so that's the transformation that I'm talking about. And that's how I got into it. And then I started working with all these other coaches and facilitators that were really living the work, as we call it. They're walking the talk. The bar was really high. It scared me, the bejeebies out of me. Can I really be good enough for this? I was used to being, top in what I was doing before. And then I go into this group and I wasn't so top at first. And it's been a journey. But again, that's that whole idea of caterpillar to butterfly. It's like, are we going to stay a caterpillar or do we want to take our wings and fly? And if we're going to want to fly off, we have to be willing to go through that process.
Now, were you doing all this having gone back to France?
Yes. Well, I did some of it from Raleigh, actually. A lot of at first, some of the trainings were taking place in Amsterdam. So I did quite a bit in Amsterdam. But now I'm at a place where it's not only that particular group that I learn from and grow with, but a lot of other like-minded souls. So there's a lot of us that are connected in the world. A lot of it can be virtual.
Yeah.
And so most of it is over here, but not all of it.
So how long have you now been in the coaching world, if you will?
Oh gosh. Okay. I started coaching school in September of 2008 and actually went in Boulder, Colorado. So not so far from you. And I graduated in May of 2009.
Okay.
So, and I was already coaching between January and May of 2009, but officially graduated as a coach May of 2009 and started my business in June of 2009. So what is that?
Close to 15 years.
14 and a half years.
Yeah, 14 and a half years. Getting toward 15. There you go.
And I was at first also having my children, which was not a straightforward process for me. So that took a while. And so I was kind of dabbling in coaching, having my children, dabbling in coaching, having my children. So it was really not until about 10 years ago. Yeah. 9, 10 years ago, where I started really getting serious about my business and growing it.
And you've not looked back.
I haven't looked back. And I've just tell you what, I've had a year of a lot of flux. 23 was flux for me. And what do I mean by that? Easily can make a list of 12 to 15 things or people which were removed from me, some of which hurt a lot, and some of which involved key clients, my business, accountants, etc. But there wasn't a question about giving up. There just wasn't a question. I mean, I'm a big girl. I've learned to be a big girl with my big girl pants on, and I know about cutting back and not having all the frills that I might like to have, but I didn't give up. And I knew that I would never, for me, this is me, I would never be happy fully employed by a company. I would feel like I'm caged.
Yeah. So you wanted to be your own person and have your own company. And there's a lot to be said for that.
There is. It's scary at times, for sure.
Well, sure.
Especially when the clients are having problems, right? When the economy's down, obviously that will affect. And then the challenge is about, of course, how to build a business that resists that and stay inspired. Well, the stay inspiring part for me is there because I'm not doing what I'm doing for the money or for the business. I'm doing what I'm doing because it feels very much like a soul purpose.
And that's a commitment that is great to get to, because when you can really say that, I mean, the money is helpful in a lot of ways and all that, but still, when it ultimately comes back down to purpose, that means a lot, especially when you recognize it.
Yeah, it's the whole, what I say to my clients, which is true. When we are really in touch with our why or purpose, that means our heart is engaged, not just the rational mind. So then I get out of bed on the hard days, not just because I have to pay my bills, which we've all been there. And I've been there many times, but wow, what a sad way to live if we do that for a long time. But when we can get out of bed on the harder days because I believe in this and I know I can help people and I know that I can make the world better one leader at a time or one team at a time or one organization at a time, that changes everything.
What are some of well, let's see, how do I want to say it? What do you think the biggest need of leaders that you coach and work with today is?
Oh, perfect. Well, that's a great segue, actually, what we were just talking about, because it's meaning. That's what I find is meaning and belonging, which go together. And so what does that look like? I mean, I believe it was the Center for Disease Control And now I didn't see these numbers myself. I heard about this, so that's the caveat. But they've come out with the number one now disease killer in the States is loneliness. Since COVID, it's loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
And because since COVID, most of us are now virtual, we don't see live humans all the time or connect with humans in a meaningful way. A lot of my clients, and I work with a lot of smart people, which I love, keeps me on my toes. And one of the dangers of us, the smart cookies, is that we very often can just operate from left brain or rational mind. Now, the left brain is wonderful. It keeps us in facts. It keeps us going really fast. It keeps us on results. But unfortunately, if we only spend all our time there, first is exhausting. But the second thing is we miss out on that connective piece, which we can only get when we slow down, when we have more meaningful conversations, when we connect with our heart, and when we all are agreeing on why we're doing what we're doing, our purpose and our values. So that is the piece that is most meaningful, to use a play on words, but it's true. Meaning is most meaningful for leaders today. And that's why I love what I do. Usually start off workshops or coaching with people that just want to get there and get fast, get the results, let's go. And when I invite them into some of the exercises where it's required that they show vulnerability, it's required that they slow down, that they connect with each other through conversation in ways, in depths that they're not used to. At first, there can be some resistance. In fact, there often is, but very, very shortly into it, the energy in the room is extremely high. They're very loud and boisterous and laughing and smiles. And I hear it constantly, every time. Oh my gosh, this feels so good. We were missing this. And last week or 2 weeks ago, I was in Morocco with the team, a newly formed team. And their leader went up and he was sharing the strategy after, and he goes, after that exercise we just did together, where all of us were vulnerable with each other and connecting, I've just saved 50% of time. Now we're going to have a much more efficient collaboration together. It was amazing because he was one of the ones, and we were preparing the day together. He was reticent about embarking on some of these exercises where vulnerability and connection would be highlighted. But now he's a winner. One exercise in and he's a winner, and he sees how that works along with the rational, logical mind.
How does the CDC loneliness play into that?
How does it play into that? Because when people are connecting from their true selves, like we started off talking about this earlier, right at the very beginning of our conversation, when people are revealing their true selves. Now, I don't mean naked, and I don't mean they have to share their deepest fear necessarily.
Right.
But sharing more of who they are with each other, opening themselves up to vulnerability, that allows for greater connection, which is naturally flows that they have a greater sense of belonging. And that is the antidote to the loneliness, finding meaning and connection. They say that, addiction, and I know that's a whole nother topic, but I have to tell you what's close to my heart are the adult children of addicts and alcoholics, etc. So we can go there or don't have to, but here's what's really interesting. They say that the antidote to addiction is not sobriety, it is connection.
I would buy that. Now, here's a kind of odd question in a way. So you mentioned COVID and all the nuances and innuendos around COVID. Do you think that connection really means it has to be in person, or can it be virtual as well?
It can be virtual for sure.
Yeah.
I have some best friends around the world, literally, I have never met in person. Literally. And we know each other inside out. I know that they get me completely and I get them, and we've never met in person.
The reason I ask the question is I hear all the time about people saying we've got to get back together. We get fatigue from just doing things in Zoom, or we can't just do it virtually. We have to be in person. And for me personally, I see value in doing some things in person. Like as a public speaker, I would prefer to do a speech in person than doing it over Zoom. But the reason is, for me, I get audio cues from listening to an audience when I'm standing there with them that I wouldn't get over Zoom. And so I get feedback. But by the same token, I have believed that we can connect virtually pretty much as well as we can if we're doing it in person. So that's why I asked the question, because I think that we we worry too much about some things and don't really focus on the connectional part of it. If that makes sense.
So indeed. So it's about quality, not quantity, first of all.
Right.
And in my words, what I heard you say, which I agree with, but just putting them in my words, meeting in person doesn't serve a whole lot if we're not going to actually connect with each other.
Right.
Meeting virtually can be very meaningful when we connect with each
When
other.
we connect with each other. Right.
Exactly. So in COVID, as an example, my colleagues and I had to all learn about facilitating workshops online. We had never done this before. We didn't know if we could create the same sense of connection as we do in person. It was a great learning curve. We found we can definitely create connection. We can do that. And at least on the workshop front, it does not replace the in-person effect of being with each other.
Sure.
So, but even before COVID, 99% of my coaching that I've done one-on-one with people, that has always been virtual, nearly. But
Mm-hmm.
I do have one great local client, and if he's listening, hi, Tom. And I take the metro every couple of weeks and go meet with him in his office. That said, he's definitely an anomaly in the sense of most everyone else that I work with would be virtual. So I was used to the virtual space before COVID even hit, and used to creating that connection.
And
But
I
that's
think
part of
that's,
who I am. Yeah. I mean, part of it, I'm sorry for interrupting you,
yeah, well,
Michael.
that's okay.
I just realized that's part of who I am. I mean, people who know me know I name the elephant in the living room. I'm deep, I'm authentic. Some people love it. They love that what you see is what you got. Some people are running like a bull in a china shop for people who don't want to be authentic. But that's always been part of who I am. So whether it's virtual or in person, that's going to be me anyway. So maybe I'm just different than the
Well,
average person.
yeah, I hear what you're saying. And for me, virtual has never been a significant problem because I've worked for a number of companies where I have had to work remotely rather than being in the office. I've had to work remotely because they're on one side of the country or somewhere else and they're not anywhere near where I am. So I've grown quite used to it. So when we had to lock down, it never really bothered me a lot, other than I couldn't travel and speak. But still, the reality is that we're a lot more flexible than we give ourselves credit for if we choose to do it that way.
Indeed.
So it is a challenge.
Yeah, and there's always pros and cons to everything we're
Sure.
doing. You can save money with the virtual, but you might be missing out on the connection piece. So you can, etc. There's different things you can pick and choose, but it's a great add-on to have in our pocket in terms of ways to interact with each other.
Yeah. So in the world where you are, human development and in that whole space, what are some of the big topics that you deal with or that people are talking about today?
Yeah, good question. Well, ownership is a huge one. Ownership, because there's a fear, particularly when we're doing workshops or even the coaching, where there's a lot of kumbaya moments, right? We're all hugging on each other, liking each other, and we walk away and nothing concrete gets done,
Mm-hmm.
or there's no momentum that develops. So therefore, ownership is a really big one that most teams with complete understanding want to see how we can get them to do that. And what's the magic sauce? Again, it's that why. It's co-creating our why. Because when I truly believe in something and I've had a say in what that something is, I'm going to own it. So ownership is a big piece. Another thing is breaking down silos. How do we do that? Connection and meaning. That's another thing. Courageous conversations go with the silo breaking down too. So silos is a big one. New teams coming together. I mean, look at, it's a VUCA world we live in, right? The volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. So nearly every team I work with is some form of a newly constructed team. And so there's a lot of how do we make this team a real team that wants to be not just thrown together, but want to work together to be productive. Those are some of the key topics. And then of course there's burnout. And how do we keep these people at the top of their game and wanting to come to work? So there's a lot around resilience as well.
Well, and I was just thinking when you were describing all this about ownership in another way. All too often, we try to take ownership of something that we shouldn't try to own but share, and let other people also have their part of the ownership of whatever it is. No, I'm a firm believer in the no person is an island or should be, and that we should all connect and we should all find ways to work together a lot more than we do.
For sure. There's no question. But, and again, if I may, having that dictated or kind of opposed from top down, in my experience, is fertile ground for people to say yes, but mean no, meaning it's not something that will stick. So when they can actually genuinely have a say and there's a co-creation happening in the way forward, that's where ownership can come in and an authenticity around really wanting to be part of this whole movement, which we often call it the movement, the program, change program, the new team, whatever it is that is the name we're giving this particular initiative.
Right. Well, for people listening, what's maybe a step that they could take to start to have more meaning in their lives and feel like they're having more meaning in their lives and in their work and so on?
Yeah, that's great. Well, the first thing would be to check in. We talked about some of those balcony moments, some of those pauses in the day to see what's happening for me. What am I drawn to? What lights me up? Where do I get the most joy? And to look to spend more time doing those things or incorporating more of them in our lives. As science tells us that energy that feels bubbly and expansive is positive energy. That means follow the good stuff. Whereas when it's prickly and icky, not good for us. Limit it as much as possible. So literally just by listening to ourselves, just like we started this conversation, listening to ourselves, listening to what feels good, but in a healthy way, not in the unhealthy coping mechanism part, and looking to do more of that. I mean, there was this, I'm going to forget her name, and I mean this with respect, this wonderful Japanese woman, and I'm forgetting her name, but she talks about sparking joy, right? With organizing your home. And she, gosh, there's a whole way to fold, there's a whole way to present that she came up with. But this phrase of sparking joy has meant a lot to me. And I often look at how can we just, a lot of us high achievers want to go from 0 to 100 like this. And we think if we don't make it to 100, we've somehow failed, which is a whole nother conversation because I don't believe in failure. But instead of putting that kind of pressure on ourselves, where can we just augment our joy by 2%? Yeah. Where can we find just 2% more meaning? And if we just look at these tiny little ways each day to bring in more, because joy and meaning go together. By the way, so does gratitude. Gratitude goes in there. And there's another idea is doing gratitude lists or just becoming more aware of what we're grateful for. Those are some really quick ways that on our own, let's say without help, that we can start digging into more meaning and cultivating more of it in our lives.
And I would augment that to say, let yourself feel the joy. Take the time to feel the joy and to enjoy what's happening, because that's going to help fill your body and your spirit. And you'll be able to deal with so many more things in a very positive way rather than just letting everything overwhelm you. Whatever comes along that's joyful or that makes you feel good, there's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to set it aside for another time. Take a minute and let yourself feel the joy.
Indeed.
Well, you are writing a book. Do you want to tell us, if you would, a
Yeah,
little bit
I feel
about
like
that?
I feel like I'm writing and I'm writing and I'm writing, I'm writing. I
I know
am
how
just
that goes.
recently, yes, indeed. It's like, is this thing ever going to see the light of day? I am at the very, very last part, just before I'm handing this over to the editors and for production and then for launching. And I'm thrilled. I've been doing a boulder move of the week for the last decade. I can't believe it. In February or March of this year, it's going to be 10 years. I've been doing a boulder move of the week, which goes out to my mailing list. And I'll give you, just in case your listeners want to hear what that is, the link for that, I'll give in a minute. But I wanted to do a book during COVID. I was feeling really low and I thought, I know I love to write. This is my craft and I want to show myself I'm also a writer. And basically it was an act of self-love to start it. What I found was the boulder moves themselves have evolved over the 10 years as I've evolved. They used to be like, when I started my business, it was very much about sales and what do you want me to be so that I can make more money. And it's evolved, like I've already mentioned, about stepping into my purpose. And I'm not going to be something for someone else if it means not being me. Let me put it that way. I will only be myself. And so the boulder move themselves, when I started writing the book, they've also evolved even in the 3.5 years since I started this process. So it's been an amazing journey just writing it. I think you would know that too, Michael, of this
Yes.
whole process. And I'm thrilled to say it's a collection of boulder moves. And I mentioned earlier about the caterpillar. The working title right now is The Caterpillar's Journey, 365 Moves to Bolder Leadership. And by the way, bold is a word that, of course, Michael, you and I have been talking about a lot today. I was actually using bolder 10 years ago because it just described a lot more of who I am and my journey, and also what it takes to be truly authentic, especially in this world where there's just so much uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my book. And if by chance you'd love to sign up, I'd love to have you. I'd love to be of service in this way. But I do a boulder move of the week. It's no more than 3 lines. I don't sell because I don't like getting emails of that nature to myself. But if you go to my website, which is Bolder, BOLDERMOVES, bouldermoves.com, you'll see in the first fold, you can click on, yes, I want transformation, and you'll be brought where you can just put your first name and your email. And again, delighted to be of service in that way. And if you do choose to do that, you'll have more information on the specific dates of when my book comes out.
I'm going to go do it.
That's cool. That's sweet.
Well, I think it's relevant and important. And I'm always, can we look at past bold moves as well?
Oh, that's a good question. Not yet. Not yet, but I can see if we can put that together. But I can tell you that when the book comes out, you're going to have 366 of
65 of them. Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
was just thinking though, that if you've been doing bolder moves every week for 10 years, that's now, well, if we go by the numbers and if it's 10 years, that's 520. So there are more there,
Yeah.
but it would be interesting since you've sent them out, they must be somewhere. It'd be kind of fun to be able to go back
Yeah.
and
Well, I
look at
think my
them.
team has them for sure. We don't have them, I don't believe, out, but for sure. And what you would notice in the early Boulder moves, I think you caught that, more transactional things, right? More transactional ideas like, um, I don't know, I'll throw something out, perform better, for
Mm-hmm.
example. I don't know. I don't even know if that's a bolder move, but something to that degree. Well, now you're going to find things like forgive. You're going to find things like remember your divinity, right? I mean, it's not all going to be more spiritually themed. It's not,
Right.
but there are a lot more meaning involved in the bolder moves of today and the ones that you'll find in the book for sure.
Well, I think it's cool, and I am going to go sign up when we're done here. But if people want to reach out and maybe explore having you work with them and so on, obviously there's bouldermoves.com, but is that the best way to reach out to you, or how can they contact you and
Yeah, well, they
explore?
can either find me on LinkedIn, so Colleen Slaughter, or my email, which is Colleen, and that's Colleen, so two L's and two E's, and at bouldermoves.com. And I'd be delighted.
And again, good Irish name. What more can a body ask for?
Yeah, little Irish maiden.
I was in Ireland doing some work with the Irish Guide Dog School back in 2003. We spent a couple of weeks over there, and I did not go kiss the Blarney Stone, but definitely enjoyed Ireland a lot. Never
Yeah.
never did meet a leprechaun. I was kind of hoping to do that, but
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
yeah,
I was just at an Irish event a few weeks ago with the Irish Embassy here. I do love I've only been there a few times. So I often say I'm not really Irish. I just have an Irish passport because I want to be respectful of the quote, real Irish people. But I love being around. They're just so nice.
yeah,
It just such a relaxed, there's that word authentic,
yeah.
right? And I enjoy it.
I hear you, and that's
Sure.
what I found over there as well. Well, I want to thank you for being with us and taking all this time. And definitely, when the book comes out, we're going to have to do everything we can to help tell the world about it. So you keep me posted on all of that. Will there be an audio version? Of course, those of us
You
who
know,
are
there
prejudiced
might.
about that,
This
I hope
company
so.
I'm working with on it, she's suggesting that we do an audio version. So
Yes, please
there will
do.
be. You would like that. Okay, cool.
I would. Well, I'm
That would be
prejudiced, but I
awesome.
would. Yeah, that would be
All
great.
right. Yeah, and I'm looking at creating an app as well, so that because it's not really a daily reader, but there are different moves, and no one's probably going to read it from cover to cover or listen to it cover to cover. But if you can get it in different, one day get a different one, for example,
Sure,
receive your inbox, something to that nature.
that would be cool.
Yeah,
Well,
for sure.
thank you very much for being here. And I want to thank
Thank
you for
you.
listening out there. I want you to know we really appreciate it. I would appreciate any thoughts, and I'm sure Colleen would as well. We'll share anything we hear. And we would love to hear from you about your thoughts about today. I do ask that if you would please give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to us. We really appreciate your ratings and your reviews a lot. And also for all of you and Colleen, you as well, if you know of anyone else who might be a good guest for Unstoppable Mindset, we want to hear from you. We are always looking for more people to come and be with us and tell stories and have a great conversation, because that's what this is all about. So please don't hesitate to recommend folks who ought to come on. And again, I want to just thank you all for being here and for being a part of this today. And Colleen, um, once again for you. Thanks very much. This has been a lot of fun. So thank
It
you.
has been. Thank you. And I don't know if we're both wearing blue shirts, almost the same color. So we both got the memo. And
Yeah.
here we are together hosting. It's been a lot of fun.
And for me, it's a little bit more random because I didn't look at my shirt this morning.
No, but it's funny. Great minds think alike, for sure.
Well, thanks for being here.
All right. Take good care. Nice to meet you and speak more. And thank you, everybody, for listening.